Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my friend and colleague Jim Gurley. And Jim and I have been talking a little bit about the craziness in the world today and how it affects us and our personal circumstances and professional circumstances. And we wanted to talk about today expectations in the context of our relationship with other people, one of the five areas on our flywheel of life. And I guess, Jim, as we discussed, the word in this particular focus could be people, could be relationships, could be others, but it's, I think, our interaction with other people, and in the context of our interaction with other people, managing expectations. And we talked about friends, family, spouses, parents, children. We have expectations of all of those people, and we set expectations and we reset expectations, and we live up to some of those expectations and we fail living up to some of those expectations, as do all of the others in our lives. And it's kind of interesting. We don't want to get terribly personal about it, but I think, Jim, and I'll throw it over to you, that expectations are a big deal, and I think we probably collectively don't do a very good job of recalibrating expectations, being specific about expectations. Is my expectation the same as your expectation? Have we clarified what those expectations are? And it can get muddy, it can get muddy. So I don't know where you'd like to go with that, Jim, but I'll throw it over to you.
Well, I appreciate you setting that up, Mark. But yeah, expectations I think is very appropriate for what's going on. I appreciate also what you said about what's going on in the world. I think there's something I shared with somebody a little bit younger because uh, my experience has been when we're in a presidential election season,
Mhm.
people get wound up pretty tight, right? There is some tension in the air, and it makes sense, right? We talk about the environment that we're in has a lot to do with this. Well, it's hard to avoid the kind of childness of each party throwing rocks at one another.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think we have an expectation that they're going to act civil and they'll act like adults, but it just seems like over the years it just gets worse and worse, and the amount of lies and the thing, and then it affects us, right? Everything affects us. That's what our whole flywheel life is. If these different five areas of our life, how what's going on, but right now there's no question. If you turn on any kind of mainstream media or any news, you're going to see one side throwing rocks at the other side,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it
I wish.
makes it gets people wound up. It's a
Yeah.
contentious
No.
environment that we're in right now. It'll get better after November, but it'll continue to heat up. Has that been your experience? And then we'll get into the uh, the topic of today, and which is expectations.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked. I totally agree. I think that you and I have kind of decided to take two different approaches to the noise. You've decided to try and dismiss it and ignore it because it's so noisy and it's so muddy and it's so
Mhm.
awful. And my decision has been, I'm going to continue to speak up because I feel obligated to, and I completely understand both positions, and I
Mhm.
wouldn't
Mhm.
I wouldn't fault either position because it's just so obvious that this is noisy shit, man. There's a lot of noise, and
Mhm.
people are, in terms of expectations, I expect people in positions of power to be, reasonable and rational and
Mhm.
pragmatic,
Mhm. Yeah, that's an
and
expectation. Yeah.
they're
Mhm.
not.
No.
They're not showing us that right now. They're
No.
emoting. Everyone's emoting.
Mhm.
And emotion is great. You're entitled to your emotions, but it's like
Mhm.
when I write about stuff and I talk about stuff and I have conversations with people, I'm like, you need I think you need to have the ability to say, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know, or I feel or I think. But those are three different positions. You think something, that's a maybe. You
Mhm.
know something, okay, and then you need to be able to justify that with data and metrics and facts. You
Mhm.
feel something, all right. you're entitled to that emotion. Those are
Mhm.
completely different positions, and we're muddling them all together as the same, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
at least in part from my perspective.
Yeah, no, it's well said. But I do think people are wound up pretty tight, and you don't know. You scratch the surface, and it could be an explosion of something that has nothing to do with what you're actually doing, but this built up emotion of the environment we're in. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
let's go around the wheel and kind of just break this one down. So we have these five areas of our life, right? And I think the framework has worked really well to put things in context of what's going on. And we'll take a quick lap, and then we'll go to this one falls underneath others, and it's the relationship with others. Um, I'll go do the other ones real quick. Of course, we have the relationship with the world. That's our worldview. We have a subcategory of that. We have a relationship with our profession, especially as men. It's a real part of our identity, who we are. Our relationship with our health, our mental health, our physical health, it all plays in. And of course, our relationship with money. It is a
Hmm.
relationship. Then we get to our relationship with others, people, and we break that into two categories. Category one being a woman, and a category two being a man. And then from those, the subcategories are woman, your family, mother, sister, father, wife, girlfriend, whatever it is. And then on the men's side, it's our brothers, our fathers, our friends, so on and so on, because they're different relationships, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the other thing I think that we agree on is how different women are than men, and to treat them the same is not a productive exercise, even though we've been told everybody's equal. Well, of course, if everybody's equal, we wouldn't need each other. So let's talk about expectations with women, because and again, that starts with our mothers, that starts with our sisters, it starts with our grandmothers, aunts, and so on. Um, and I think we both got a couple stories we could share with respect to privacy. I'll share some recent stories about expectations with girlfriends, wives, ex-wives. So, what's your thoughts on that one, Mark?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm flooded with different examples of things I could talk about. I think
Yeah.
if I went back to my grandmother's, I didn't know either one of them terribly well. They passed when I was pretty young. But they were very different. My father's mother was a very traditional, you know, uh, my grandfather brought home a paycheck like $15 a week or
Mhm.
something from fishing and gave it to her, and then she took care of everything else and sat in his lap, and it was really loving, long lasting. They had 11 kids, actually 12.
Wow.
One of them
Yeah.
died as a baby.
Uh,
And so it
Catholic
was
Irish, right?
Irish Catholic, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they had sex 12 times. I don't know.
But
but
a great
but
expectation story.
but she was wonderful. She was wonderful. And my other
Mhm.
grandmother was wonderful too, but she was a very different woman. She was married to an angry guy. My
Yeah.
grandfather, I didn't care for. He was just angry. He was
Yeah.
spiteful and angry, and he might have slapped her around. I don't know. He might emotionally abused her, whatever. I remember I heard the story one time where she went back to her mom after a run-in with him of some kind,
Mm.
and her mother said, and this is like early 1900s, right? You go back to your husband. That's where you belong. It's like, man, that doesn't fly today. And then I think of my mom, who committed suicide in her late 70s. And, the expectations with her is I couldn't, there were certain things I couldn't talk to her about. She wasn't willing
Mm.
to talk about them without flying off the wheel. So I
Yeah.
had to make a choice. Do I want to have a relationship with her, loving relationship with her, and just stay away from these three topics, whatever they were:
Mhm.
feminism, abortion, military, I don't know, whatever they
Mhm.
were. There were two or three or four of them. And I don't have a relationship with my sister that's worth much right now. We haven't talked in years because she also takes a position that if you believe this or you like that, then you're an idiot or you're
Mhm.
crazy, you know?
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, I don't when I look at the relationships I have with the men in my life, my grandfather's non-existent, but relatively pleasant on one side, kind of cranky on the other side. Um, I didn't play those. I didn't have to play those same games. It was more black and white for me. It was like,
Hmm.
we agree on this or we don't agree on this, and that's okay. But we can
Yeah.
talk about all of it, and we don't have to hate on each other. It's very different for me. And I also have two daughters, as you know, and a son. So I have the same comparison that I can make. I feel like I can talk to my kids, all three of them, about anything, but I have to have a certain level of sensitivity with my daughters that I don't need with my son.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
just my perception.
No, it's great. There's a lot there that I think is worthy of talking about because this is everybody. This is not just unique to you, right? Um, we are made up of thoughts based on um, experiences in our life that set these expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
these experiences, as you explained, come way back, go all the way back to our childhood, and the relationship that you had with your grandmother, the relationship you have with your mother, creates an expectation that naturally you're going to project on your wife or other people because that's somewhat of an expectation. And you know, God, there's so much what you said. There's a evolutionary change too, right? Of a role, the roles from your grandmother as a wife and a mother in relationship to today. I use this term and I'm playing around, but I'm not. I'm as serious as I could be, right? We've and we've talked about this before. We have a generation of women that have been told they can have it all and do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, there's an expectation that they can actually pull this off. It's not fair
Mm-hmm.
to them. It's not even practical. It never has been practical. But
No, I think generally speaking, when, and this is true, I think, of all of us, men,
yeah,
women,
yeah,
everybody, it's like, if you choose this, then you choose to sacrifice having that. And whatever it is, you only have so much space, you only have so much time, you only have so much energy. And if you choose to invest your time and energy in your profession, to suggest that it's not going to sacrifice something in your personal
hmm
life is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. No,
It's not math. The
yeah.
math doesn't work.
No, well said, Mark. It is ridiculous, but it doesn't mean they stop doing it. It doesn't mean the expectation goes away. It doesn't mean that they don't want the, let's just say, traditional value benefits, but yet they don't put in the traditional value input, the input output scenario, right? And again, I'm not trying to criticize them. This is just an explanation that creates this unrealistic expectation as a man and a woman relationship. Now we're talking about obviously relationships with our significant others, whatever that is, right?
Well,
So,
I think it to me it comes from my perspective right now as I speak, as I exist right now in this moment. I've got two young daughters that are 30 and 35,
mhm,
and they're killing life in most areas, but they're a little confused about what expectation they should have about what their significant other might be moving forward, family, marriage, children, whatever. And then I get my own mother, who's gone, God rest her soul, and how she spent the last few years of her life, well, more than few, looking back on the decisions that she'd made in the context of our current environment, where she's like, she was growing up in old school world, and then feminism came around,
mhm,
and then, to
yeah,
your point, women started to be told that they could have it all.
mhm,
And her position before she left this earth was regret, like, I
mhm,
could have done this, or I should have done that, or this
mhm,
wasn't fair, and he did this and she did that. And I'm like,
mhm.
that's not a there's no winning in that, you know. So it's
No.
like my girls are, I would say they would agree with me, you know. Let me put words in their mouth, but a little bit confused. Like, what should I expect in a guy? Like,
Yeah.
what is a man? What is a
That's
man? What's masculinity and what's toxicity and what's
yeah.
right and what's equal and
Yeah.
what's wrong? It's all fucking, it's confusing, you
Yeah.
know.
And it goes back to expectations, right? They're
Yeah.
trying to establish an expectation. And it's like, as you said, this is you can have it all, you can do it all, but that doesn't produce happiness or joy. In fact, I think it's produced the opposite in some cases.
It totally has. I mean, you know, not to get political, but the most recent noise around the Trump's vice president candidate is JD Vance, is that he is calling single women cat ladies. And it's like, well, you know,
Yeah, but everybody knows it's true.
well, everybody knows what a cat lady is, right? So it's,
And
come
that
on, let's not pretend we don't know what that means.
right.
And you know, can we say that jokingly and say, you know, like, what's wrong with aspiring to be a mom and staying home and taking care of your kids and making meals and doing the laundry? What's wrong with that? Well, nothing. Nothing is wrong with that. And so we need to stop saying that. We need to reset that expectation. If you choose to do that, and I know women that have chosen to do that, and they're very happy with that choice, it's very fulfilling. And society has to stop saying that's wrong. Like, you don't aspire to be a CEO, who gives a shit? So
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what? Being a mom is the best job in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Get good at that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Here's an interesting podcast, very relevant to the topic. But she's a well-known doctor on relationships, particularly marriages or relationships. Uh, Perel's her last name. Have you heard of her before? Esther Perel. I think I'm saying that right.
It rings a bell, but I can't
Yeah,
I get
she's huge. She's got a podcast. I think she's from I think she's from Eastern Europe, some kind or something.
yeah,
She has an accent.
the latest version of Dr. Ruth.
Yeah, but her whole thing isn't about sex. She talks a lot about sex, but it's really more about the relationship and the expectations that men and women have, unrealistic expectations. But I just listened to this podcast a couple days ago. I thought it was really good. Her stuff is fantastic because she goes into really what we're talking about, but also um, the social construct of a modern day marriage today versus how it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. This is an evolutionary um, social construct of an expectation that is completely unrealistic.
Yeah.
And she does it obviously better than I am right now, but with some real research and some real firsthand experience as a 35-year plus marriage counselor and
Yeah.
helping people get through this. And I'll
Yeah.
share some of my takeaways from her podcast. Um, you were trying to say something, Mark?
No, you know, I was just thinking about in the context of expectations. I think there are certain principles that are true, and regardless of what's going on in the outside world, regardless of circumstances. And one of them that comes to mind is comparing your situation or your circumstance to someone else's situation or circumstance. That's a bad thing to do, no matter what. Comparing yourself to other people, like taller, faster,
I
smarter.
don't know what that has to do with this gal's. I'm trying to understand the connection between this gal's uh, points about a marriage and
Well, if you take what I just said inside of a marriage, it's like, if one of the people in the relationship has a certain expectation about what's supposed to be because of something someone else is doing or saying, that's going to break. You know, it's
yeah,
a
that's not where I
relationship.
was. That's not where I was going with it. But yeah,
Go
if I
take it wherever
yeah,
you
if I
want to
just
go
get
with
back
it.
to it, I just want but what one of the main takeaways was it was separating romance from the marriage contract. She actually calls it a marriage contract.
Hmm.
It's referred to as marriage, and it's supposed to be blended with this very romantic and erotic experience, which is not at all practical. Apparently, it wasn't that way. Hasn't always been that way. This has evolved over time to a social construct where women and society believes that you're going to have this amazing romance along with all of these other things in life, and there's just a collision of the two things, especially as you get older and you spend more time with each other. I thought it was interesting that I didn't know this. I just learned this, that it was not uncommon, back in the day, to be married and then have a romantic partner, a romantic relationship, because it was such a different experience. And of course, in many religions, that's sin, and that's evolved into that. Even though if you're not a practicing, let's just say Catholics, of course it still happens, and some people still did it. I just thought that was very uh, enlightening to know that at one point it was not uncommon to have a romantic partner, because you received a different uh, experience. There was a different expectation, and
Mhm.
that marriage was more seen more as a business arrangement slash contract to, and I think that's quite accurate, actually, if you think about how we've combined the two, and then understand why we have such a high divorce rate of 50%. And even of the 50%, there's many surveys that say of that 50%, 80 people are miserable about their in the relationship because of the expectation, whether that's the expectation from the wife to the husband or the husband to the wife. And it goes back to the core conversation that we had even before we started recording, right? The
Yeah, I reflect back in the context of what you just said. I
mhm,
expectations change, circumstances change. You know, I my if someone were to ask me why did my marriage fall apart, I would say communication. It was a lack as expectations changed, as things changed, as children came in, as wealth and financial circumstances is improved or went down up. Children got older, responsibilities were accumulated, and retirement and empty. Just name a life event, you got to talk through that shit,
mhm,
and she stopped. At one point everything was my fault, and that was just where we were.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it's like, I can't get anywhere with that. I can't work with that. I have to you
mhm.
have to say to me at some point, let's talk about that, or it's just going to fester and become a swollen boil that just bursts. And that's what
Mhm. Did
happened.
you
I
ask her
just
that?
all the time,
And
all
what
the
was her
time.
answer? Again, back to expectations. Was this a relationship with her father, or where did she experience this
Oh yeah, you can, I
unrealistic
mean,
expectation?
if you can, she was anticipating that I was going to leave her from the day we met,
Oh,
because
wow, interesting.
her father left her. He just walked out one
So
day,
she
I
was
think.
expecting you to do that, and then she
Yes, and
manifested that, actually, and
yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah. I mean, it's I'm not a psychologist, but I
yeah, no,
can
you don't have to be. That's a
yeah, I can connect the dots. Everybody
yeah,
can connect the
yeah,
dots if you
interesting.
if
Yeah,
you yeah, and then you trace it back. It's like our
yeah,
childhood. What when you're a little kid, what's your relationship with your mom? What's your relationship with your
yeah,
dad? What are the expectations of what's going to happen in this relationship? It's like that's either clean or it's fucking dirty,
yeah.
and it's usually a gradation of both, it's not black and white, it's gray, you
Hmm.
know.
What were your thoughts about her explanation of this, again, evolutionary social construct of a marriage today, and how um, way back in time, I don't know how far back in time, it was not uncommon to have a romantic relationship outside your marriage uh, partnership, business. That's how she described it, and it's. But I think that's a worthy conversation. There is when you have that much let's just say business, because that's what a marriage is in a lot of cases, right? You're
Mhm.
combining things to create children and do things. There's a lot of things going on. It will affect. the romance, which is sex, and I mean it's you've even shared with me before. You have two separate homes, and that's probably creates some of, or let's just say that addresses some of the uh, conditions that we when you're instead of being with somebody forever all the time, you can create some romantic situations when you have some separations, but that's also a big part of a relationship for a man and a woman. I
Yeah.
like the I like the way she used the word romantic, because that's a big driver, and and there's an expectation for men. It's more sex, right? That's our definition of romance is basically just intercourse. For a woman, it's more. It's intimacy. It's closeness. There's
I
other
think I think
different
I think
expectations.
I think I think we both need a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly men are more, black and white about that. As we were joking earlier, it's like,
Yeah.
are you ready? Yeah.
Yeah.
What, how you feel? Doesn't matter. Well,
Yeah.
are you tired? Doesn't matter. Are you?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
yeah, women. I mean, men and women are different. Let's just throw that out there. There's nothing wrong with that. I think expectation wise, I think about the people that I know that are married, or divorced or single, um, whatever. And I say this all the time, and to my kids too. It's like, what matters between you and the woman that you are in love with, whatever that relationship is what you guys think about whatever the issues are. No one else, there's no other opinions. If you can agree on sex, if you can agree on kids, if you can agree on money, if you can agree on religion, whatever the topics are, the outside world has no say in what's right or wrong for the two of you.
Mhm.
But what matters is that the two of you agree on those topics. And
Yeah.
I've seen, my older brother's one. He had a very, very specific conversation with his wife, who he's madly in love with and has been married to for, I don't know, 35, 40 years. And they've had all kinds of things come up in their lives, like we all do. And they've had successes and failures and kids and adoption, and man, just the list goes on. But they both agreed at the very beginning. And I can remember one of the main issues was, I'm going to be a fighter pilot, and you have to be okay with the fact that I'm going to live a dangerous life, and you can't worry about me, and you can't, you have to accept that. And she did. And she
Mhm.
gave him a couple of ultimatums with regard to religion and children, and they just agreed. And my opinion on their stances was completely irrelevant.
Mhm.
I don't think most people do that. I don't
Yeah.
think most people do that.
Yeah. I agree. All right, Mark. I don't think we're going to solve this one today.
Nothing to solve, dude. It's a journey, and it's ongoing.
Yeah, it is.
It's
Yeah.
ongoing. So,
Yeah.
all right, dude. We'll catch up
All
next
right.
week.
Talk to you next week.